So, just after this meditation, this morning on Saturday, I thought of sharing some wisdom from the Buddha's teaching on grief. He said, uh, grief is the measure of your love toward your loved ones. He didn't say it exactly that way. He said, Pemato jayati soko. Pema is love, affection. Jayati arises. Soko, grief. Pemato jayati bhayam. With love also arises fear of losing, fear of the worst, fear of inevitable. Pemato vippamuttasya, from someone who is free from, mutta is a good Pali word. Mutta is liberation. Pamutta is well liberated. Vippamutta is completely liberated. From someone who is completely liberated from pema. Natti soko, there is no grief. Kuto bhayam, how can there be any fear? The Buddha once approached this farmer. The Buddha knew that the inevitable was yet, going to happen that night with a huge flood coming and washing off all that this farmer owned. Farmer was happy when the farmer was saying pakko dhano, to say that rice is boiled. The Buddha said akko dhano, that there is no anger boiling in me. The words rhyme so similarly. The Buddha prepared the mind of the farmer to see behind the curtain of grief. He was going to face a tragic night. And flood came and the farmer's properties were destroyed. That preparedness he had through listening to the truth that the Buddha revealed prepared his mind to be ordained, walk the path freed from such tragic grief. The grief comes rushing in our hearts like tsunami hitting, and you may not know how to face it at that time. So being prepared completely certainly has an effect in you. Being prepared completely to face that truth, that grief arises when conditions for grief is ready. Grief vanishes when conditions disappear. So behind that grief is dependently arising nature and the cessation phenomena. When grief is dependently arising, heart is involved, that is the physicality. Mind is involved, that is the mentality. And that external something, a nous, is involved. The moment you hear it, a loss of someone, there is this rush of grief, memories, rush of sadness coming, crashing in you, crushing you. That prepared mind, like of a Buddha, see that truth before it happens, and there is preparedness in his mind. An enlightened mind has that preparedness. I remember from being ordained, those days when I was still, just as I entered my novice monastic life, that year I was ordained in May and the tsunami happened in December. I was very pain-stricken, grief-stricken. Many villagers in that town where I lived died. Especially the people that came and spoke with us the day before on the full moon day. They had died. their bodies lying under trees in the temple. And I was pain stricken. But as I started learning Dhamma, I developed a different kind of wisdom. And now when I hear the news that can be very saddening to my friends of the same age, but it hits slightly differently in my mind. I think that preparedness is expected by the Buddha from a disciple, that there is that preparedness before it comes and lands crashing and crushing you. You start seeing the arising phenomena of grief and the cessation phenomena of grief. Let me read a quote that I think captures some of what people may feel about grief. I like to read these on Saturdays. I hope you believe that you can still make a beautiful life for yourself, even if you lost many years of it to grief, or darkness, or a wound that wouldn't close. So as I say that, grief is a measure of your love toward loved ones. There is that grief and seeing the ignorance of it that prepares you for any future incident where grief will be the only way that your body and mind respond. In there, that a wound that wouldn't close will come to closure, and that you will grow around it, healing as you breathe in and breathe out, noticing how the wounds of grief have closed. Instead of being attached to grief, instead of being attached to suffering, you will start to see that there is freedom from suffering. There is another quote that may help. This is from Morgan Richard Oliver. Then one day it clicks. The pain you had turns into peace as you accept that everything had to happen exactly as it did for you to be exactly who you are now. You hold no blame, bitterness, or resentment toward the experience, person, or yourself. Instead, you see it as the catalyst that led to your change and development. The very storm that shook so much in you also worked to clear your path. So these are some of little wisdom that some people have come as they grappled with various incidents of grief in their lives. But in the eyes of the Buddha, he wants us to be prepared. He wants us to see the ignorance, avidya. Avidya is the word for ignoring the truth. Vidya is knowing the truth. Truth is that grief is part of the human existence. Truth is that there is contacts and feelings that come hand in hand, touching each other when grief arises dependently. Dependent on what? This is the teaching of dependent origination of the Buddha, that in a person's mind who is experiencing grief, that mental agony, the sad feeling, painful feeling arises as a bodily painful feeling and mental painful feeling. And now, as you analyze that experience, you see there's something external, that is the news that you heard that someone passed away. And now, mentally and physically, you become conscious of that news. So it landed in your psychophysical being. And now you start letting it sink in your body. And there are millions of arisings and cessations that happened. And you are mindful of that experience, mindful enough to see that dependent on the body and contact, body and something that you touched, dependent on being conscious on that, there is contact. Body, external touch, being conscious, body consciousness, there is contact now established. This happens so fast. This contact is called phassa. Phassa paccaya vedana. There is feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feelings. Often with grief, you feel painful feelings. And you start, because it's painful feeling, you start disliking it. There is the truth that disliking is the element of craving that needs to be worked on. That is your teacher. This is why we say anything that bothers you, anything that irritates you, that is your teacher. Any painful feeling is your teacher. Any frustration is your teacher. In the journey of freeing our minds from anger and attachment, these are the teaching pillars that stands out there strong, teaching the Dhamma, the truth to us. With that in mind, let us share some merits. May the suffering ones be suffering free and fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief. May all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have that's acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, Devas and Nagas of mighty power share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you. Happy meditation.